G'day from Australia. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which I'm broadcasting. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. My name is Ashley Davis. Welcome to my coding live stream. Today I'm continuing development of my Kanban board extension for Visual Studio Code. Eventually I hope to publish this extension on the VS Code Marketplace so that it's easy for anyone to install and use. But before that I need to finish coding it. And today you can watch as I do test-driven development to create an important TypeScript function that's going to be used in the core of the extension. I'm going to do my best to explain what I'm doing, while I'm doing it, and also why I'm doing it. In a moment, I'm going to show you how you can catch up on previous sessions in this series. You can watch those later to see everything that's happened up until today. Please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is AshleyDavis75. The code for this extension you can find on GitHub. It's on my GitHub, Ashley Davis, Taskboard VS Code extension. Please feel free to download a copy of the code yourself here, clone it, or please fork it. I love for people to contribute to this project. Please fork it, make your own changes, and submit a pull request. If you scroll down here, you can see the README, which tells you how to get it running in Visual Studio Code, how you can debug the React UI by itself. Let me give you a quick demo of what it is I'm building. So this is the prototype. You can see this is Visual Studio Code. On the left, we've got a markdown file. On the right, we've got a Kanban board. So this looks a lot like Trello. This is actually React Trello. Let me show you React Trello. Should have had this open already. That's all right. So if you just Google for React Trello anyway, you'll find it pretty quickly. So this is an open source implementation of Trello, basically, built as a React user interface. It's really awesome. It saves me a lot of time. Now I've got this prototype set up. I can do some simple stuff like moving these around. You watch on the left here. You can see the markdown file is being updated. So this sort of gets to the core of what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to be able to edit these markdown style to-do lists in Visual Studio Code using a Kanban board. Now I've got a lot of useful stuff in the prototype, but what I'm doing is I'm rebuilding it, and at the moment I'm rebuilding the core functionality of it, which converts from markdown to the Kanban board data, and I'm using test-driven development to do that. If you want to catch up on past episodes of this, you can find it on my YouTube channel, which is the Data Wrangler. Look under playlists. You'll see a couple of playlists there. Coding Livestream Taskboard is the one that you want. And you can see here, if we go into that, there's quite a few episodes already in the series, and we're up to part 6 today. So there's quite a bit that you've missed. There's quite a bit you could catch up on. But let's press on anyway. So today what I'm doing, let's have a quick look at the code that I've done so far. Got my command prompt here. I'm just going to open Visual Studio Code from my code repository. You can type code dot to open Visual Studio Code from a directory in Windows 10. That's what I'm using here, Windows 10. Let's get these windows lined up. Cool. So I'll show you the prototype function first. If you've been watching this series, you will have already seen this, but let's just have a quick look. So the prototype is in JavaScript, not TypeScript, and this is the function here. Let me zoom it out a bit so you can see the whole thing in its entirety. Markdown to board. So this is a function that converts a markdown file to Kanban board data, and it starts by converting or parsing the markdown to an abstract syntax tree, which is a data structure that represents the markdown in memory. And then we've got a bunch of complicated code here to basically walk the abstract syntax tree and produce Kanban board data and then return it. Now I've been rebuilding this function using test-driven development. This was just a prototype. It's got lots of rough edges, and there's probably errors there are definitely errors that I'm not accounting for there. And things that I need in there that aren't there yet. So I've been rebuilding that using test-driven development. This is what I've built so far. I've got some nice TypeScript types here, partially defined. Markdown AST to board data. So it's taking a Markdown abstract syntax tree and it's converting it to board data. Now this isn't quite as complicated yet as what we saw here. Actually, it's probably roughly there. It's probably roughly there at the moment. But there's a little bit more yet that this function has to do. These are the tests that I've been working on since the last live stream. If you're watching the last live stream, since then I have refactored these tests. So I'll show you what that looks like in the diff in a moment. So you see I've got a bunch of tests here. I can load an empty board. I can load a board with a column. I can load a board with multiple columns. I can load a task, and I can load multiple tasks. What I want to do today is I want to be able to basically store in each element of the Kanban board data, I want to be able to store like a path into the abstract syntax tree that I can use for later updating the lane and updating the task as well. And in fact, the updating part of it is part of my editing tests. I should say that it's tests. So I've written down a list of tests that I still have to do here. It's like my little kind of to-do list in this file, the tests that I want to make, but they're all related to editing now. So I've basically got all the tests that I want, well, except for these tests here, which are testing errors and edge cases, which I will get to eventually. But the tests that I want to get to next are the editing tasks, that we can change the title of a column in the Kanban board, that we can change the title of a task in the Kanban board, and so on. So that's what I'm trying to get to, but the first thing is to be able to get these paths. And to do that, I want to use Ramda. Now, it's probably a little bit overkill to use Ramda. I'm going to show you Ramda right now. So if you remember the last session, I gave you a taste of what I was going to do. Here we've got some JSON data that represents the Markdown abstract syntax tree. I'm gonna copy that into the Ramda REPL just to show you what I want to do with Ramda related to the Markdown abstract syntax tree. So I do have the Ramda REPL open here. So Ramda is a great little functional JavaScript library for functional coding in JavaScript. I haven't used it much, and there's only like one function I want to use from it at the moment. I wish I knew the library well enough to use more of its functionality, and hopefully in the future I will. But for the moment, I've just got one function I want to use. I'm just copying and pasting my data in here. It'd be good if I could just collapse that, but it doesn't seem to. This editor is not that sophisticated. So what I want to do here is I want to say like, how do I reference one of these values? If I want to say change the title of a column, this heading here in the Markdown abstract syntax tree is the heading for the to-do column. So how do I index this node if I want to change that data? Now, one way I can do it is using a Ramda path. So this is what I've got in my example here. I'll copy that across. So I won't save it yet. I'll just execute this code. So R, which stands for Ramda.path, which is the function which basically says with this path. So the path is like an array, but you can imagine the array being like almost like a file system path, right? So if it was a file system path, it would look like this. But in reality, it's a path into a nested JavaScript data structure. So what we're saying here is we're saying, from the children field, that's an array, get element 3, and then from the children on that, get element 0. And let's see what that is. So you can see on the right here what the result of that is that it's type text and value to do. So this is a way to basically pull out the heading for a, let's call it a column. I mean, React Trello calls it a lane. I kind of prefer to call it a heading, but so the terminology is a little bit confusing. Let's call it a column heading. And I could just print that in the REPL. So you can see that it's the same thing here. But what I could do here is I could set the value of it here to be, blah. And then if we look at that column heading again, you can see that it's actually updated that field in the object. And in fact, if we look at the whole abstract syntax tree, which is a little bit difficult because it's all on one line here, but if we scroll across, we should be able to find that. There it is there. So you can see that it's changed it from to do to blah. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking to do. I want to be able to edit the abstract syntax tree. I don't want to completely reserialize the abstract syntax tree from the updated Kanban board data, because that might lose user data, and that would be a real problem. That would be a real issue. So I don't want to do that. So this just sort of gives you an inkling of what I'm about to do. I'm about to kind of get this this sort of path into my data. I'm going to store it as an array, so I don't need to kind of store it like a file system path with slashes, although that might be a good way to serialize it if you wanted to kind of store that on disk or something like that. But I am going to store that as an array. Before I do that, let's just catch up on what I did in between the last session and now. So if you remember back, I had a whole massive amount of test data in each of the new tasks. And I had previously made a function, which I've renamed now to make test data. But the original version of this function, basically I've extended it so that I can cut down on the amount of test data that I have to have in a test here. And so I call this function make test data, and I pass in an array of columns, and then in each column I can have an array of tasks, and it's all sort of optional. So where's an example? So in this case I'm just passing in one column, but no, sorry, here it is. I'm just passing in one column, but no tasks under that column. And then at the more recent ones, like can load multiple tasks. Here I'm passing in one column, but it's got multiple tasks. And so that's generating, what that's doing is generating a markdown abstract syntax tree that looks like the real thing, purely for testing. So let's have a quick look at that function. So it's a little bit complicated, but it does a really important job. So it's like, for each column, it's pushing a node into the abstract syntax tree that is the heading for that column. And then for all the tasks of that column, so we're iterating over tasks here. It's pushing a list item into the children of that column to be the tasks, and at the end it's returning the whole kind of abstract syntax tree for use in the tests. Now that's changed a little bit, so let's have a quick look at how it's changed. If you want to find out how code has changed, you can do that in directly in GitHub in the UI here. You can look at the commits. So in any project, look at the commits. And you can see, so the latest update, sorry, a couple of days ago, is that I've refactored the tests so that all the test data is produced by the helper. So we can drill down into that into that commit and see more information about it. And it's showing you here what was changed. So you can see that was the name of the function previously. I've renamed it. I've added stuff to it. And the real benefit of this, if you can see down here, like see how much it's removed. These big red areas here that it's removed from my tests, that's how much it's removed from each test, and replaced it with this little green area here, or this little green area here. So you can see that it's had a huge impact on making my tests simpler, easy to manage, easy to understand, that sort of stuff. It's really important to refactor your tests. It's as important to take care of your test code as it is to take care of the code that you're testing. It just makes the test so much easier to manage, and having good tests is really what's going to help you do refactoring, and add features without breaking your code. So it's really important. I'm going to show you how you can do that in SourceTree as well. Where's SourceTree? I've got it open here somewhere. There we go. So you can see I'm looking at the history of my repo in SourceTree. I can't zoom in, unfortunately. SourceTree doesn't support that. SourceTree is a great UI for dealing with Git. I use it all the time. I use it every day. So if you look at the actual commit here, you can kind of bring up the window here, and you can see the changes. Again, you see the big red areas removed, replaced by the smaller green areas. So that's something that's massively simplified these tests. Another way you can look at this in SourceTree is to use the external diff tool, if I can find that. Let me try. There we go. I can't remember how to get to that through the menu. I can only remember the hotkey. So what I did there is I hit Control D, and that opened my external diff tool, which I've got configured to be WinMerge, which is a freaking awesome program. It's only available on Windows, and it's really cool. If you're on Linux, I would suggest using Meld. It's another great piece of software. But WinMerge is just my go-to for many years. It makes it easy, really easy to navigate through the differences, really easy to see the differences. You can zoom out to kind of see everything that's changed. And you get this really cool view on the side as well that kind of gives you an overview of what the changes are. Of course, the other way to kind of look at diffs is to to look at your history is to use the command line and use Kitlog. So that will show you. It's just not as easy to see what's happened here. It's a bit more faffing around to see diffs and stuff like that. So in some cases it's just better to use a UI. Now, before I start testing this, I've already done this earlier today, but just to show you, I'm running my tests. So I'm running npm test, that's running jest. I just want to check that everything I've got there so far is working. Just good to double check that, yep, I got 7 passing tests, that's awesome. Now, what is it that I actually want to do? Let's just fold down some of these tests so I can kind of get an overview here. So I want to basically be able to add this path to my loaded column or my loaded lane, and also to my loaded task. So I might start with the test that can load a column and add that again. I'm going to rename it though. What am I going to call it? It's something like, loaded column has a path. Maybe not the best name for a test, but let's update that later if we think of a better name. So what I want to do here is I want to have this path. Let's say has an AST path. That might be a slightly better name, and I'll even call my variable AST path. What are we expecting here? I mean, what I might do to start with. In fact, I'm just going to focus on this test, right? So I should really start my tests in watch mode, so I'll just do that first. npm run test watch. So I've got that configured to run jest in watch mode, which is running jest here, you can see, with -- watch. That's going to start my test so that I can do a bit of live coding and running the tests while I'm coding. I'm going to drill down just to this test, so I'm only going to run this one test and just focus on that for the moment. And I'm not going to worry at the moment. I'm not going to worry if I break any other tests, which I will probably do. I'm just going to focus on getting this test prepared and then making this test passed, and then my next plan of action after that is to make sure all the other tests work. Now, of course, it works at the moment because it's just a copy of that other test that I copied it off, and there's nothing different about this yet. But what I want to do here is I just want to remind myself of what an AST looks like. I don't actually need to do that there. I can actually put that. I'm going to hit Alt up arrow to get that up there. So I'm just logging out what this test markdown AST looks like, and this will allow me to figure out what the path is going to look like. It's pretty simple in this case. So I'm going to say the path is this heading, right? It's going to be the first child. So that's pretty simple. Let's just say I'm going to do a second loaded column after this as well. So let's say this is the first loaded column, and we're looking at the children as the 0th element of the children. That might be enough. That might be enough just to reference a column. Like I was thinking of drilling down a level below that, but that might be just enough by itself. So, of course, this is going to cause a breaking test. I don't think I need this console login now, so I'll get rid of that. I'm expecting this test to break, obviously, because I don't have the code implemented to implement that. This is the way test-driven development works. You make a failing test, with your expectations of you know what it needs to be successful. And then you go and implement it. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add it to my, I'm going to add this AST path variable to my TypeScript type definitions here. Now this is per lane, so it goes in the lane data. I'll chuck it down the bottom. So the AST path is going to be a string. I should start commenting these fields as well. What is this going to be? So this is a path to the node for the column in the markdown AST. What is it? So this allows for the AST to be edited and serialized without losing data. Now that's maybe a little slightly verbose comment, but it's helping me get my head together about what I'm actually doing with this thing. I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm doing with this thing now. So now I've got a TypeScript compilation problem because I've added this to my TypeScript type def for this interface here, and it's you know at the place where this is actually being used, that is now missing, and that is causing an error. So this is a nice thing about TypeScript, is it's kind of like giving me the next place I've got to go to get my test to pass. I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-B here, and I'll see if my keyboard's playing up. That's better. So I just hit Control-Shift-B. That allows me to compile the TypeScript code in Visual Studio Code. I can go to the Problems tab, and I've got the actual error here. It's the same error that you see on the right here from running the tests. I'm going to double click that. That takes me to the place in the code where I need to kind of update it. So I need to add an AST path here. That's enough to get that compiler issue fixed. So I shouldn't have a compiler issue now, but I do still have a test failure because I'm missing the version of AST path that I want to have here. So this is telling me this is what it wants to see, and this is what it is seeing. Now I can kind of cheat, and you know, cheating in this way is kind of like a funny little part of test-driven development. I'm going to cheat, and I'm just going to type in the thing that it expects to see. Oh, I can't do that. TypeScript's telling me I can't do that because it's a number. Now, a number is perfectly valid to use for a Ramda path like this, so I'm actually going to update my type definition here now to be. Can I do this? Can I do a string or a number? Sweet. Don't you love TypeScript? So this can be a string or a number, but it's an array of them, right? So an array of strings or numbers. Each element can be either. Now the parentheses there are needed because if I didn't have the, sorry, I just lost it. If I didn't have the parentheses there, it would be a string or it would be a number array. And I can't have a string array or a number array because that expects it to be one or the other, either a set of strings or a set of numbers, but not mixed up together. I need them to be mixed in together, so I'm going to make it a string or a number. I'm actually just going to go back to my Ramda REPL and just to check that I'm actually making this path be the right way. Yeah, I don't even need this, right? So I can see here that I've used a string. So I don't know why I just defaulted to using a number. A number might work. A number might work with Ramda. I don't know. Let's try it. This might give me an error. Or it might just work. Let's just try looking at that column heading. Yeah, that seems to work. So I'm going to go forward typing it properly like that. I think that's a good way to go. So AST path will be an array of strings or numbers. I filled that out properly here. I've got my passing test. So I've got my one passing test that I just added. And that's why I added this first as well, because to really do this properly, I need to basically be able to add a second test here. And this is where I'm sort of forcing myself to implement this properly. Now, this is, I'm really taking test-driven development to the extreme here and taking very granular, iterative, simple steps. You know, in regular coding, I do take shortcuts. You know, I do sometimes jump ahead. That's okay as well. But you know, like, it's good to be able to go slowly as well. It's good to be able to go slowly, step by step, and really understand how this can work at that level. I wonder if this is going to run my 2 new tests. I've got it.only on both of them, but I'm not sure how that deals with when you've said only run this test for 2 tests. That works nicely. So I'm now focusing on my 2 new tests. What I want to do here though is, instead of loading this one column, I'm going to add another column. So that's the first column. Let's call that column 1. I'm going to add a second column here. Let's call that column 2. I don't need this column name variable. I don't at this point, you know, at this point I don't even care about the column name. So let's just call that column, wipe that out. Like, I don't care to test that. What I do want to test is that this thing has 1 lane. So to equal 1. So I'm making my tests less fragile by doing this. I'm making them more resilient by only testing the things that this test particularly cares about. It doesn't care about what the column name is. It's not what I'm testing. What I'm testing here is the AST path. So I guess I went a little bit overboard in what I was testing there. Let's, what am I looking at now? So I'm actually gonna pull out that lane. So pull out that first lane, and then on that lane, I'm going to check that its AST path is equal to that. So you can see here that I'm testing the same thing. I'm not testing the things I don't care about. So hopefully that'll keep the test running and there won't be any failures. Oh, it's still failing down here in the new test I've added, so let's clean that up. Now, what I'm going to be testing in the second one here, there's going to be 2 lanes. So I'm going to be, in this case, I'm going to be getting the second one. And I'm going to add that in a second. So I'm going to add that expectation in a second. I'm not going to worry about that just yet, because I'm not sure off the top of my head yet exactly what that should be. I know I think I pretty much just have to vary that, and it may be just a case of being, you know, it being the next one. So let's just put it at that. I'm not 100% sure. So I've got my test data, my new test data. There's 2 columns. I'm passing that through my function. I'm running an expectation here that I've got two lanes, which I should have. I'm getting the second lane out, which I should have. I'm just going to do what I did before. I'm going to console log the test markdown AST, just so I can double check, you know, where it is in the AST that this path is going to be, basically. So it's not quite what I thought, and this data structure always trips me up because it's a little bit, it's a little bit unintuitive. But you know, think about it. This isn't a data structure that represents a Kanban board. This is a data structure that represents a markdown file that's pretending to be a Kanban board. So that's the difference. What I'm trying to do, in fact, is to get this into the Kanban board format. So each column is actually 2 things. It's the name of the column, and it's the list of tasks in the column. And so that is element 0, that is element 1, and then the next one is going to be element 2. Is that right? So this is going to fail. So because I hard-coded, basically for this outcome, this one here is going to fail. So this is forcing me to go back and do it properly. So you can see here I've got a failing test. And this is where I go and write some extra code. So I'm switching back to the actual file that I'm testing here. and this is where my AST path is. What does this need to be? You can see here I've got the child index. So that is essentially all I need. Each time here, there's the code where it's looping over the children in the abstract syntax tree, and at each iteration of the loop, it's adding 2 to the child index. So it's skipping over 2 nodes for each column. So I think all I need to do here is pass in child index, and I basically have what I want. I suspect this test is still going to fail. Oh no, I got it. So that's cool. So I've got 2 passing functions. Now the final phase of getting this working, I can get rid of this item from my to-do list now. So that's tested. I'm getting rid of the onlys. So I'm going to run all the tests now. And the question is, am I going to have broken the other tests? I suspect I will have. And I may have to go and adjust the other tests. Yeah, so they all have this AST path. It's possible that some of these other tests are like testing too much now. And this is where I can basically go back and I have to go back to get them working. I have to go back and refactor them a little bit. But I'm just gonna, to make it simpler, I'm just gonna go through them one at a time. And just focus on one test at a time to make sure it's working. And that way I'm not overwhelmed with a whole bunch of broken tests, which is like, you know, that can be a horrible situation to be in when you've suddenly broken. That one works fine, so that's not a problem, but I suspect this one will be a problem. Because I haven't put, I've got an AST path, so you can see the AST path here is missing, and it's not tested for here. Now I could fix this literally by typing in what I see over there, right? I could type in children 0. So all I'm doing here is I've just taken what it's expecting and I've just typed it in there. Now this should get that test to pass, and this could be a recipe for fixing every other test, but like this is not what I'm testing. This is not what this test really tests. Like it's testing 2 things now, and I'm testing for this down below. So if I was testing for this here, I don't need that test down below that I just added. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of just restructure this a little bit, and basically just to make sure it's testing the minimum amount it needs to test. So I want to make sure there's only one lane, and then I'm going to extract that lane, and then I'm going to run expectations on that. All I really care about here is this bit, right? The ID and the title. So I'm just going to expect the lane dot ID to equal column name, and the same here for the title. Now I expect this will make the test pass, but let's see. You always have to check. You can't just assume anything in this game. You have to test and double test everything. So that's cool. I think what I can do now is I think I can use that recipe to fix every other test. So again, this should be the same. What I'm doing, I'm just checking the column name. That should be the same behavior for that test. Can load multiple columns. This is going to be a little bit different. So here I'm testing that hang on, I missed a bit there. In fact, I missed a bit in that one as well. I missed that expectation. So I want to get that in there. And then basically I want to do the same thing down here, but this time I'm testing for 2 lanes. And I can say, you know, lane 1 is equal to column 1. And then I can repeat that here, but I will change this to be lane 2, column 2, and getting the next element out. And hopefully that's the same thing. I'm just going to run this now and make sure those tests up into here actually pass, to make sure I am kind of, that my assumptions are valid and that I am doing this the right way. In fact, I've got all my tests passing, so that's a pretty good situation to be in. 9 passing tests. You can see how the tests are building up. If you've been watching this series from the start, you know, we started from 1 test and like literally 1 line of code, and over time we built that up to this more complicated function. Yeah, cool. So I think at this stage it's okay. These tests are about as specific as they need to be, so that they haven't been broken by the changes that I've made. Now this is a commit. This is where I'm going to commit this code, because you know I've added something that I need. I've added tests. I've refactored the tests. There's nothing bodgy that I've added. I'm in source tree now. I'm just doing a diff. I'm just double checking here that the things that I'm added I'm happy with. There's not much to check there, but that's the value of small commits as well, is that there's not much to check. There's not much to test. So you know, if you work a whole day and you do like, you know, like 100 small commits or something like that, maybe 200, whatever. I don't know what you can get through in a day, but what that results in, you know, you test each small commit well because it's easy to test. That, you know, at the end of a day's work, you have a huge sum of working code. You know, unlike, you know, if you went and typed a whole day's worth of code and then went and started testing it, you know, it might take you weeks to get that working. So let's have a look at the actual tests here as well. So they're the refactors that I've done. They look all right. I've run the tests to make sure that they still work. The new tests that I've added, updated my to-do list there. So I'm going to commit this. So now when converting the markdown AST to Kanban board data, we save a path to the column to each column's node in the AST. This is so that we can then edit that node directly. So I'm committing that. I'm just going to briefly break out of my test here. I'm going to push this up. So if you are following along with the code, this code is going to be on GitHub in just a moment. You can grab this. You can run the test for yourself if you want to do that. Cool. I've still got tests to do, so I'm still I'm restarting my test in live reload mode. What I want to do now is exactly the same thing, but I'm going to be generating the path for each task ID. So similar type of thing here. I'm going to have a test. First loaded task has an AST path. So this is starting a new test from scratch. Now this is going to be very similar. By the way, these little blue marks here that I'm creating, they're bookmarks. They're part of the bookmarks plugin to VS Code. Oh, am I back? Sorry about that. You lost me for a second there. I'm back again. So I'm creating a new test. What am I doing? Where did I get to? I need a task. So I'm loading a task. I need a task. I can get that from here. I've already got an example of a task. Let's grab that. So I've got that in there. So we've got one column with one task. I don't really care about the column or the name of it. I only care about the task. Let's run the function that I'm testing. So I'm passing the AST into the function markdown AST to board data. This is the function that I'm testing. I'm getting back some board data. Now what do I care about? I care that there's a lane. I mean, I don't really care about that in this test, but this is like, you know, I need to check this before I really kind of go on and try and actually pull that lane out. So I'm expecting there's one lane. I'm pulling out that first lane. I'm expecting that, what am I expecting here? I need cards, right? A card is a task. That's sort of the React Trello name of it. So in this data here, I'm talking about lanes and cards, which is the React Trello terminology. I'm expecting that to equal 1, so I'm expecting to have one card. Let's pull the card out. So the first card. And now I want to run an expectation on the AST path for that, which we don't have yet. So I better go and add that to my TypeScript type definition. And I'm literally just reusing this, so it's basically the same as that. And in fact, I might type that. Let's add that there first. I do need to add some other fields to card data, like title and ID. I don't actually have those yet. They are being used, so I'm suspecting this is being used as an any data type somewhere because I hadn't actually defined those yet. This is a path to the node for the task. It allows, yeah, that's all the same. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna export a new TypeScript type. It's going to be called AST path. That's a good name for it, isn't it? And that is going to equal this. So instead of defining that type twice, I'm just going to use that. Put a nice little comment on this. That's the comment. That's actually the comment for that interface there. So the comment for this is represents a path into the markdown AST that can be used to identify a node in the AST for editing. So that's where we're getting to. We're trying to get to the point where we can actually edit this abstract syntax tree and save it back to a markdown file. So I've got that there now. And now I can run an expectation on that. What is it going to be? I'm not entirely sure. Again, I'll refresh my memory by doing a console log of the actual data. Now, I'm only really doing this because this data, it is quite complicated, and there is quite a lot there. And so it's useful just to have a look at it. Okay, the thing is here I can't see the children. So I really want it, the actual tasks are under this list here, under the children, which I can't see. But I can make that visible. I wish Jest would just make that visible for me. But I can do a JSON stringify on this. Make sure that there's some good editing there so I can see what I'm doing. That'll give me sort of a pretty JSON view of the data. And that's going to allow me to see what I want. So you can see this data is actually quite complicated. And that what I want to get to here is this list item. Underneath this list. So how do I get there? That's the question. So it's definitely under children. The heading is the first child. So the second child under children is what we're going to get to. So let's start fleshing this out. So let's expect this to equal, to start with children. And it's the second item. So the first one is 0. The one we're after going down to is item 1. Then we're going to go down to the children of that. So we're diving down a bit deeper now into this abstract syntax tree. And that's probably where we want to end up, is like this item 0 here of the children, just to start with anyway. So hopefully that'll get me what I want. Now, of course, this is going to fail, so this is going to give me my failing test, which is like probably the most important step of test-driven development, is to get that failing test. So it has failed because it's expecting to get this AST path for the card. It's actually getting undefined. I'm gonna focus on this test. I'm going to drill down to it. I'll get rid of my console logging there, just so I don't need that anymore. I got what I wanted out of that, so I'll get rid of it. Now, I still got a failing test, but I'm just focused in this. All the other tests here you can see have been skipped. I'm just focused in on this one failing test. Focus is really important. You know, having a tight focus on what you're doing at any given time. I've got a bit of an error here because it's actually missing the AST path now. So I added that to the definition of a card. So I need to add that here, AST path. I can fix the error just by adding an empty array there. And like I did before, I can literally just hard code this whole thing to what I'm expecting to receive here. And that's going to make this test, this next test pass. But that by itself is not enough. So I need to take the next step beyond that, which is to, same as I did when I was checking the AST path of the column, I need to have a second one here. And again, I'm just going to do the console logging here to double check the actual structure of this thing, what it turns out to be. I'll have to do the JSON stringify here again. That's not exactly what I want yet because I want a second task. So this test is going to be called second loaded task. Oh, has an AST path. The second loaded task has an AST path. So that's going to be task 1. I'm going to inject a task 2 into my test data here. Now I'm just going to look at my console logging here to see what this should look like. So what I'm looking here for is the next list item. It's just literally the next item in the array. So I think what I'm after here is just the element at number 1. And I'll just comment out my logging there, just in case I need to get that back in again in a second. So now this test should fail, and I should be ready to go and actually implement the behavior that makes this pass. So you can see there that my first loaded task test is passing, the second loaded task test is failing. This is all because I've hard coded this. I think this is fairly easy to deal with, right? Or is it? I've got a for of loop here. I think I need to change this to be a for loop with an index. So because I need that index, I need to know what that index is that I'm looking at. So what I really want here is list item index equal. This better be let actually, so I can change it rather than const. List item index to length. So while that is less than length, and at the end here we're going to increment that. Open curly brackets. This is code that I don't want here now. The old for loop I don't want anymore, but I do need to have this list item. I will pull that out of here, and I will use the list item index to get that. Oh, I deleted the wrong for loop. There you go. That's the right one. So this is still going to be a failing test. I haven't updated this bit yet. What I want to do here is I want to have this is where I want to plug in list item index. This should get me my passing test. Oh no, what's wrong? No problems there. So my problems are empty, so I'm not worried about that. Oh, something. It got 2 lanes. It got 2 lanes here, but it expected 1. So maybe that's wrong. Oh no, sorry, 2 cards. Yeah, so I've got 2 cards, so that needs to be 2. My test wasn't set up properly. That was the problem here. what I want to do is, now that my test is set up properly, that's not even working right anyway. What is it getting? Did I save that? I expected that to work and I didn't see why. I'm not sure why this is failing. Oh, there is a problem here. I've hard-coded this to 1 for a start. That's a bad thing, but that's something I can deal with. I need to make a note to make a test for that. So I need, for this, this new test, I need to test that a task can have an AST path. Task in second column can have an AST. That'll force me to fix that. That's okay. I don't think that's related to this current test failure though. What is going wrong here? Let me try. I'm going to try console logging this. And just to make sure, like, I don't, at the moment I don't care about that test, so I'm just going to remove that. I'm just going to focus on this one failing test. I didn't have that console log, so let's start that test run again. And see what this console log here gives us. Children 1, children 1. And what it's... And another thing you can do here when you're not sure what data is coming out of something is to actually do a console log here. This will actually give me, if I get rid of that expectation, it'll actually give me a passing test, and I can log out the card here. Actually, what I just want to see what's in there. Like, it doesn't make sense why this isn't working. There's some silly little error. So it's getting the 0. Oh, of course. My bad. I should be getting the second card. There's always something. There's always something. Cool. So I've got that test passing. I'm going to get rid of this console log here. Now, because I've been messing around with the test, and I'm not even 100% sure if I've broken the test, I'm going to hard code this back to 0 and make sure that tests fail. It's always really important to know that your tests can fail. If you've got a bug in your test, that means your test always passes. It's not a worthwhile test. So that's why we make the tests fail the first time that we kind of create the test. We start with a failing test, and that's so that we know the test can fail. Anyway, so I'm just going to put that back the way it was. I'll delete that console log there. I'll delete the it only. Hopefully, I'm probably going to have a few broken tests now. I've enabled all my other tests, all these ones that we were skipping previously. Yep. So these ones, I have to basically apply the same sort of fix to them that I applied before to my column tests. Where are we? So can load a task is the first one. So I'm expecting that there is one lane. That's great. I want to also, so I just basically want to kind of refine these expectations here so that I'm not testing too much. I'm pulling out that lane. That's what I want to do. I want to expect that that lane has just one card. I'm going to pull out that card. So pulling out that first card. And then I'm expecting that the card.id to equal task. I should really refactor the string into a variable here, but I'm out of time basically today, so I'm just going to wrap this up really quickly, get these tests working, and then I will be done for today. So that should allow that test to pass. I need basically the exact same thing. I need the exact same thing for this this test here, except I've called it the task a different name, so I'm just going to change that over. Delete that. So yep, that task. So now I'm hoping this second last broken test will be fixed, and then all I've got to do is deal with this one here. Did that work? So I've got one failing test, and I'm about to get that working. So I'm expecting there to be one lane. In this case, I want to expect that there's going to be two cards, two tasks. And I'm going to check, I'm checking both here. Task 1, task 2. Now let's make sure I get the right card out this time. So this is going to be card 2, the name task 2. Oh, do you see what I did there? Almost missed that. I could have had a failing test there. But hopefully, fingers crossed, this gets me all my passing tests. Awesome, I've got a suite of passing tests. So that's it for today. I'm well and truly out of time. I've got a lot more work to do on this. In the next session, I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm taking next week off, but I'll be back in 2 weeks, and I'll be finishing the functions to edit the AST, the Markdown abstract syntax tree, as our user is editing the Kanban board. So that's going to be a really exciting moment to actually, hopefully get through the rest of this test-driven development and finish this function. The code that I've just done then, the test that I've just wrote then, I'm going to commit that in a moment and push it. So you'll see that live on GitHub very soon. And if you want to catch up later, please keep an eye on my YouTube, and please reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is AshleyDavis75. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.